Once seen as a blessing, monsoons have been wreaking havoc across South Asia in recent years. The unprecedented rainfall is causing deadly floods and landslides, killing hundreds and displacing thousands of people each season. I'm Anelise, Borges, and on this episode of The Stream, we discuss how the most vulnerable are grappling with this new reality and what governments and civil society should be doing about it. Global warming is shifting rainfall patterns across South Asia, where nearly a quarter of humanity lives. And that is putting pressure on all levels of society to act and adopt new strategies. But how best to track and respond to these weather changes? Joining us today to discuss are climate scientist Roxy, Mathew, Koll from the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, joining us from Pune. Farzana, Faruk, Jhumu, a youth advocate with Unicef Bangladesh. She's joining us from Dhaka. Also from Dhaka, Shah Chowdhury, co-founder and president of Footsteps Bangladesh. And last but not least, climate activist Disha Ravi joining us again from Bengaluru. Pleasure to have you back with us on the stream, Disha. Thank you all so much for joining us. Roxy, every year around this time, we see the news out of India and Bangladesh, and the images are devastating. We see floods and landslides. I wanted to ask you if monsoons really are getting worse and why.
The monsoon is the lifeline for the people of South Asia. It supports the life of 2 billion people, a quarter of the world's population. Now it has changed. Instead of having moderate rains spread throughout the season, we are having long dry spells, intermittent with short spells of heavy rains causing landslides and floods. So instead of the rain spread out through the season, we are getting a season's or a month's rainfall in a few days to a few hours' time. So now it's like the heartbeat of the monsoon has changed. It slows down for a while, then beep, it skips a beat, then raises up all of a sudden. So that's the kind of change that we are seeing, erratic monsoon. And that's because of the science behind it, because it's connected to global warming. A warmer atmosphere holds more moisture and for a longer time. So it doesn't rain for a long time, but when it rains, it powers like cats and dogs. And that's what we are seeing. And this is climate change in action, turning the monsoon into a more unpredictable weather system.
So very erratic and very violent downpours of rain. Disha, I wonder if you've been witnessing or experiencing this around you, where you are in Bengaluru.
Yes, we have. We've already had a slight downpour in Bangalore with not frequent rains necessarily, but it has started because our monsoons have started. But in the recent years, it's been getting worse because even as a landlocked city, Bangalore has been built on lakes and wetlands, and we have experienced severe flooding where a lot of workers, immigrant workers, and the working class and their homes have been flooded and they have been wiped out because of the rain. But this is not fully just the fault of the monsoon, and climate change. It's also because of unplanned infrastructure and development that we did not anticipate and that we have not prepared for. And we still continue to do that to this day. Without taking into account that the climate changes is just going to get worse. And we instead should be building climate resilient infrastructure.
We're going to talk a little bit more about infrastructure later in the show, but I wanted to get Farzana in. We often talk about how these developed nations have the biggest footprint, but those who are paying the heaviest price are poorer nations, like, for example, Bangladesh. Can you tell us about the most immediate challenges and risks facing vulnerable communities in Bangladesh today?
Yes, actually, if we are like right now when I'm talking to you, it's raining outside. And in September, we were supposed to see rain is just ending, but it's starting right now. And currently in southern part of our country is still underwater from a previous flood, and the area flooded recently was not supposed to flood it, and we were not prepared for this flood. At the same time, the southeast of our country is getting like landslide, and the people, indigenous people of this land are getting hurt because of this monsoon, and because the land is not actually very much aligned with this monsoon, and we are not prepared for how we need to figure out. So even though Bangladesh is very good at like early warning, we didn't had the warning.
Because it's harder and harder to predict, I suppose. And I'm going to get Roxy on that a little later. But Shah, we talk a lot about adaptation these days, almost as if to say, that's it, the battle is almost lost, really, and we need to adapt to a new reality that is here now. Climate change is not some future problem. You are the founder of an organization that works towards that, towards mitigating effects of climate change. Can you talk to us about Footsteps, but also about one project that I'm really interested in? It's called Dream Water.
Footsteps is basically an organization which designs and implements social ventures and programs to address extreme poverty challenges, where climate action is becoming a bigger and bigger issue by every year. So we design all these types of projects which builds resilience of communities on ground to tackle the adverse climate hazards that are happening, be it cyclones, be it flooding, be it erosion, etc. Just last month, we faced one of the worst flooding in our history. And interestingly enough, it happened in a region which hadn't experienced flooding since 2004. We were one of the first organizations to go on ground. I myself went, and within the first couple of days during a relief and rescue operation, I actually dislocated my shoulder, my left shoulder, and it took us 9 hours to get me to the nearest hospital because logistics was completely broken down. There was water at some places, there was land at some places, and every step was a risk as well. You didn't know if the next step was gonna be land or water itself, or a river body itself. So we actually invented a portable water filter called Dream Water. This idea came back in 2018, where we saw flooding as an opportunity where we could harness all these flood water into drinking water. So it's a portable water filter, which you can carry as a backpack or you can carry around, which can convert up to 15,000 liters of flood water into drinking water. And we're teaching rural women on how to use these systems so that they can become flood respondents as well as water entrepreneurs in their neighborhoods with this device. So our work is ongoing, but what is happening that every year, even though Bangladesh is experienced when it comes to addressing climate change, every year is like a new experience because flooding, cyclone, and all these climatic hazards are happening at such an unpredictable rate and unpredictable zones that it is getting harder and harder for us to address each year. So our action needs to be more reactive, more proactive rather than reactive, because we need to start taking action now. We are to lessen the impact and loss and damage in the future itself.
You do some fascinating work, and as you said, there should be many more initiatives also coming from the government. I mean, Roxy, it's often civil society that comes up with brilliant ideas like this one. Do you think that governments and authorities in South Asia are doing enough to mitigate the problem today?
Yeah, I would say we have failed on a global scale, massive fail. Emission needs to be urgently curbed, but we can't wait while the globe negotiates. We need to urgently mitigate and adapt to those changes. And particularly for South Asia, we are in the tropical region, surrounded by warming waters and melting glaciers from the Himalayas. These are changing quite rapidly. So we cannot wait for the globe to act. And as a country, India is doing a lot on mitigation and adaptation, but it doesn't work out on local levels. Yeah, mitigation. If you talk about mitigation, renewables have increased to about 150 gigawatts functional, but that doesn't meet growing demands. In fact, last year, what I know is that around this time in October 2023, India was in fact importing coal to meet our energy demands. And this is the state for any other country, developing country or developed country as well. The demands, energy demands are showed up. And it shows that we need urgent action, we need investment and transformational change in science and innovation, energy sector, etc. But one thing we are forgetting is adaptation, because that is much more complex. as a country, again, India has done national assessment, plan, adaptation funds. Some states have also done similar adaptation plans and funds, but it is not working at local levels. We need localized early warning systems because we cannot wait for the national or the state assessment plan to work out something that doesn't work at local level. Yeah, and which means that we need to assess locally, probably at village or panchayat level, and frame adaptation policies and disaster management based on that. And this is not happening, which is why local communities and collective action is coming up scattered here and there. I'm totally in for collective community action, which Farzana, Shah, and Disha was talking about. In fact, I'm working on a mission on climate-equipped schools and villages where they go on basic monitoring of weather, how much it rains in the last 24 hours, what was the maximum and minimum temperature in the last 24 hours. This, the equipment cost less than $20 per school. And this can be scaled up with water harvesting and solar powered schools, which is the next step to secure water and energy security.
And that's a great, it's a great initiative as well to educate students, right, in terms of the problem. And it's very interesting what you said about localized warning systems, especially in a country as massive as India. I mean, if you have to wait for the central government to say something and trigger down the measures, it would take an eternity. Disha, we actually connected with someone from your town that is doing great work. Harsha Tej is an environmentalist who's been doing some very important local initiatives on the ground. Take a look.
Now this is a lake. When it rains, water from all the catchment area from above collects and comes in through the inlet and it enters the lake. Some of the plants like this Canna indica purifies the water. Its roots absorb a lot of heavy metals and toxins and keeps the water clean. So this is a 10-acre lake that never existed before. We created this lake. This is in the heart of the city. It is in an attempt to fight the water shortage, the water crisis situation in Bangalore. It will act as a reservoir and it will also help recharge the groundwater when it rains and probably even help the communities around to recharge their borewells. And this is an attempt to fight climate change and also help the environment, the birds and animals, local and migratory, for a place for them to come roost, nest, or even take a dip in our harsh summers. And I would recommend these kind of lakes in most locations where there's water scarcity, so that when it rains, we catch the water where it falls and help the water sequester into the ground and enjoy the water for the tough days, the drier days to come.
Disha, when you talk about more infrastructure to prepare for what's to come and for what's already here, actually, is that part of what you mean as well? Initiatives like that, a simple initiative in terms of harvesting rainwater?
Yes, I think harvesting rainwater is really important, and what Harsh is doing is absolutely brilliant, because in the mid-1800s, Bangalore was actually known as the city of lakes. We had over 1,000 lakes. And now the recent data shows that in 2016, they did a survey and we have only 200 lakes, out of which only 17 are considered as clean and healthy lakes. That is a huge drop down from what we used to be. And it's not that long ago. So we do need local initiatives and we need adaptation on a very hyper local level, because India is like really, really diverse. What you can implement in my locality may not work well in another locality, because we're such a diverse country. Our land is different, our people are different, and it's really important to have that community consultations and community-led efforts to make it work. And this should come not just from the community, but from the government. We are at a point in time where we need to be actively questioning them and having conversations with them. When I mean the government and local authorities, to ensure that they are implementing and making climate change a priority.
Because I guess there is quite a few different systems of policy in place. What is lacking here is perhaps implementation. Farzana and Shah, I mean, you guys are very young. I'm curious to know, Farzana, if you think that people around you in Bangladesh, young people like you, are as aware that climate change is very much a reality, and are they all involved in attempting to tackle it? Do you feel as though whenever you talk about climate change around you, people understand that everything that is happening is connected to it?
Okay, if we are talking about Bangladesh or even in South Asia, there is no way we actually question that whether climate change is real or not. We see it every day. But if we're talking about, do we actually know how to mitigate? Do we actually know how to adapt? Young people are in forefront. Young people are doing a great job. Maybe not in a more policy level, maybe not more how they can connect to the government following negotiation, but in the field they are the one who is doing great job. As Shah was saying that his team was in the field and there was many more who was directly working in the field when there was flood, when we need emergency support. So I think young people knows, but they also need more support in terms of knowing more, like in technical terms.
We also spoke to another organization in India called Watershed Organization Trust, who's been working on ecosystems restoration, climate resilient and sustainable agriculture, and water management for the past 3 decades in rural India. Take a look at what they do.
So at the larger level, I think at the humanitarian level, basically what you are doing, whatever innovations that we are bringing in, whatever interactions that we are having with the community as well as to the ecosystems around it, I think the things are changing very fast. The environment is changing, people are changing, and your interventions cannot be same all the time for all the years. So we need to be very dynamic in terms of identifying innovative solutions and implementing quickly on the ground. And the approach that we should take at a larger level is ecosystem-based adaptation, EBA. We would call it as EBA approach, wherein you need to have people at the center because we have to adapt to the surrounding, but also not forgetting the ecosystems that is actually making us sustain there. If you forget about that and only focus on development part, we will be in trouble in near future.
Shah, you mentioned this before about things changing fast and that we need responses that are accurate and in tune with the speed with which everything is happening around you guys. But I also really liked what you said before the show about the importance of talking about solutions and not only about the problem. Can you help us understand how important that changing narrative really is in terms of tackling climate change today?
See, here's the thing. For the last few decades, we've been saying that climate change is real. We've been basically sharing this narrative with everybody. But right now, climate change is neither a myth nor a legend. It's the reality on ground right now. So in order to address the issue, we need the examples that we can also replicate and be inspired by, just like the example of Harsha that you shared over here. Because these are the solutions, locally led adaptation, which is also backed by public-private partnerships that will ensure that we're able to build communities resilient to the impacts of climate out there. And in terms of the knowledge itself, young people are very knowledgeable regarding the impacts as well as people on the ground. We also need to start sharing this knowledge, especially regarding the actions part, as well as the relation of climate change with other sectors such as health, such as livelihood enhancement, agriculture itself. Because I'll share an example. I went to pitch at a bank who had funding for climate change adaptation projects. So we created a health program, which we pitched to them. And one of the directors asked me, what is the relationship between climate and health? See, these are the issues that we need to address, to create this knowledge that people are aware, especially the ones with the resources, so that we can ensure that adequate amount of resources goes into projects and initiatives which are scalable to basically address the impacts of climate on ground. Because right now, we honestly don't have much time. We need to start promoting as many examples of action on ground so that other people can be inspired and can also replicate these ideas in their own way, in their own communities.
That is very, very important. Roxy, we talked about the difficulty in terms of forecasting what's to come. I mean, according to a study published back in 2021, the Indian subcontinent should expect 5.3% more rain during the monsoon for every additional degree Celsius of global temperature rise. How do you even prepare for that? Where should be the focus right now?
Yeah, our research shows that parts of South Asia have seen a threefold rise in extreme rains during the last 7 decades. Now, this is in response to that 1.2 degrees Celsius of global warming. By 2030, IPCC shows that we'll reach 1.5 degrees Celsius, and by 2050, we'll reach 2 degrees Celsius. And with every degree Celsius, it is not 5.3 actually, it is 7% increase in rainfall. And particularly in the tropics.
I'm so sorry, Roxy, what does this look like concretely? What does this mean for people?
Yeah, so it means that even that 7 or 10% that is going to be happening in the tropics, that increase is going to be scattered in a few days to few hours time. More intense rains over localized regions. So we see events like cloudbursts happening. Cloudbursts are like when you have 100 millimeter or 200 millimeter of rains in just an hour. Yeah, so and when that happens, or regions like mountainous regions, hilly regions, it can cause landslides and flash floods. So you can't wait for forecasts because this happens in a few hours' time, and forecasts fail to pick up these kind of events. So the only thing that you can do is to identify the hotspots that are susceptible to these kind of landslides and cloudbursts. For that, you need excellent monitoring, excellent assessment. So you identify hotspots and frame policies so that you can safeguard both lives and livelihoods. We cannot, if it is a hazardous spot, you cannot have people living there. You cannot have quarrying and mining and other activities which change the landscape there, which make it much more vulnerable. Right now, what we see is we squeeze the rivers, we mine the hills and the coastline as well. So all these regions which are vulnerable to climate change are also seeing heavy land use landscape changes. So we need to work on that, identify hotspots and frame policies to safeguard lives and livelihoods.
Disha, one final word from you. I know that because of your work as an activist, sometimes you face quite a lot of backlash from authorities who think you're anti-India or anti-development. What is your message today as we all know what's happening, and especially with all this information that Roxy just shared, that it's all very intrinsically linked to climate change. What is your message today to those in power in terms of protecting communities for the future?
Message is very simple, actually. Just asking for clean air and clean water and land and access to basic human rights and a clean environment to live in is not an act of terrorism. It is not something that is against the country that you live in. It's not against anyone. It's a basic human right. It's central to our existence. And when someone asks for those things, it's important to engage in conversation and dialogue and list them out instead of shutting them down or considering them as anti-development or in my country, anti-India. It's important to engage in criticism because that's what makes a democracy. And we really need more of that from our leaders.
Disha, Roxy, and Shah, thank you all so much for joining us here on the stream. And of course, thanks to Farzana as well, who we had a little earlier. Thank you for being part of the show. And thank you all for tuning in. If you have a comment about our show or any of the episodes, talk to us on social media. All you have to do is use the hashtag or the handle AJStream, and we will look into your questions and suggestions. Take care, and I'll see you soon.